Cool. Yeah. So,
Well, we can hang out. There are going to be a couple people coming.
yeah.
And we're expecting 25 people.
Okay.
And they'll start trickling in. Do you ever do you ever just spend time with the plants, just smelling them, enjoying the
Yeah, definitely.
process?
Yeah. Yeah, I think especially as winter comes along, that's something that outdoor growers are pretty jealous about. You may have heard of people with the seasonal affective disorder lights, and essentially what they're trying to do maybe is provide enough blue light um, to provide something a little more along the lines of what the sun would. So that's what we're trying to do as well in the horticultural lighting. So yeah, it's not a bad idea. I think it's a healthy hobby for people to have in that way.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I have a bunch of patients that grow, and everybody tells me it's like it's not even just the product. It's about caring for something and being around something that you're helping to grow. It's cathartic in its own right.
Yeah, totally, totally. It's great to see. I mean, they progress so quickly that it's great to stop in and see what the progress is today, and
Mhm.
see if any of the plants are doing better than the others. And yeah, it always smells great.
I'm sure I would love the photo. I like photography as a hobby, and it'd be fun
Oh,
to do
cool.
like snapshots here and there, and just sort of watch it and then play it in a slow mo, or maybe it's a time lapse.
Yeah, yeah. That was something I missed it for this grow, but I was kind of thinking about they have little security cameras that people put in the corner of their grow space and they do a time lapse. It's pretty cool stuff.
It's
I'm trying
cool.
to find more of these Instagram people they'll do like several different exposures to get a macro lens to get really great photos. I have one from a guy on here that
Mhm.
I'll point out. He does pretty good work.
Yeah, I'm terrible as far as like quality of photography goes, but it's fun. It's just for the fun of it. All right.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
we have 10 people so far. I'm sure other people will trickle in.
Okay,
But
cool.
we can start off, and people can watch the YouTube later if they want.
All right, nice. Yeah, so everyone should be able to see my PowerPoint screen right now. So this is session 1 of 4. So this class will talk about how you can start growing at home, specifically indoor. So we want to just show you that anyone can grow. So here's a photo of my grow from last cycle, just so you can get an idea there. And you can also see more photos on my Instagram. And if you want to get in touch by email, we have that there. It's just Honey Bear Grows, one word. All right. So we'll talk a little bit about my experience and qualifications. So I'm a home hobbyist grower. So I'm interested in helping patients. I do a small scale growing, which is less than a kilogram per year. And I grow inside in a tent. Lately, I've been growing autoflowers, experimenting in that way. I'm learning the soil food web basics, and I've just been growing since 2018. So we'll talk a little about what I don't know and what I may not be able to help you with directly. So I'm not professionally linked with the cultivation world or the medical world. I've never done any outdoor growing, although I'm in contact with a bunch of people who do. And I haven't done any deep water culture or very automated hydroponics, and no large scale or any kind of any kind of complex concentrates. We'll talk a little bit about how to make very simple concentrates at home, maybe an RSO, something like that, in session 4 of 4. But let's talk about what our goals are for the series. So we're going to talk about getting you the information that you need so you feel comfortable setting out to grow. So that's going to be your budget, the timeline for how long a cycle takes and when you'll be able to get your medicine. And then we'll give you guidance and know what steps to watch out for that are going to be really critical to deciding the success of your first grow. This is also a little bit of accelerated education. So especially this first presentation is going to be a little bit fact dense. And if you are familiar with growing, and if you've grown in the past, then some of that you may have heard of already. But there are a lot of things about cannabis and about growing inside that people aren't necessarily familiar with if they're just coming from tomato gardening or something like that. And even if you have no gardening experience, we'll get you on the right path here. So we want to emphasize that this is part 1 out of 4. So we'll be doing about an hour-long session once a month. So starting now, and then we'll continue once a month to check in. So what we'll be doing is, you can see I have a grow cam upstairs. You can see the little seedlings there. They're small seedlings in big pots, but we'll track their progress as we go. And then we'll also cover all the topics that you need to know. So in this first session, we'll talk about what I mentioned earlier, the budget, the timeline, and the yield, just so you get that under your belt, and some of the plant basics. And then we're going to start thinking about researching what seeds you want to purchase. And then I'll tell you how you want to germinate your seeds. So just in case you do purchase them, you'll start out on the right foot. And then in session 2, we'll get in depth on the different kinds of seeds that you can have. And then we'll get really into the botany of the plant that you do need to know. We'll talk about hermaphrodites, things like this. We'll talk about hydroponics a little bit, so you have an intro there. And we'll talk about what you need to do during the vegetative growth of the plant. That would be phase 1 of plant growth. And then after that, in session 3, I'm going to start giving you purchasing decisions. So you're going to want to be purchasing lights, a grow tent potentially, maybe some ventilation, maybe nutrients. And then we'll also talk about when to flip to flower and start growing some buds. And then 4 of 4, we're going to go over the common issues, how to harvest your plant, how to dry it and cure it. And then we'll go on to some further learning in case there are interesting topics that you guys would like to explore that might be beyond my knowledge. Okay, so I want to really sell you on why you can and why you should grow at home. I definitely, I am not an experienced gardener. I have very little experience with that prior to this. The one thing that I have done for you is research, and I have made the beginner mistakes. But aside from that, all you need to grow is to just get started. A little experience will help you as you go along, but we'll talk about why you want to grow at home. So modern cannabis has been bred to be an extremely fast-growing, high-yielding, and also a genetically diverse plant. So it grows all over the world, and we have access to these genetics now. So growing, you'll find it's a learning experience. So you learn patience, of course. You know, the plant takes a little while to produce some buds for you, and you also learn some problem solving. And it's also, as Jeff Lowenfels here says, it's an introduction to gardening. So the only thing addictive about cannabis, people say, is growing it. So it's a lot of fun, and I think you're gonna continue on after your first successful cycle. Okay, so the main thing that we can talk about here. So let's say you're a medical patient or something. You're gonna cut your costs enormously, and you're going to increase the amount of inventory you might have by 10 times, 20 times. Essentially, once you've established your grow, you're going to be looking at continuing costs of $1 per gram, if that. And you're also going to have a secure supply. You're going to have inventory, jars and jars of it, okay? Whereas if you maybe went to a dispensary, they might not have exactly what you wanted or something like that. Okay. You also are going to know what goes into your medicine. Sometimes we don't know all of the things that go into cannabis plants. Um, we do have rules around use of pesticides and certain problematic plant growth hormones, but it's useful to take it a step farther and know um, exactly what's going into your plants. So maybe you compost at home. That could be something that you feed your plants. Or if you want to take this to the next level, you can go the hydroponic route and really push things and really see the most productive growth out of your plant. Okay, so the home grow, as opposed to a large scale grow, you're going to be able to impart quality to your plant. So you're going to be able to give it your full attention. You're going to be checking on it every day. You're going to see how it progresses. And you're going to be able to harvest it at the perfect time, which we'll talk about. And the buds are not going to be over dried. That can be something you see in dispensaries occasionally. Sometimes people are under commercial pressure to harvest the plant maybe prematurely or to dry it a little too quickly. So you're going to have something that really preserves all of the terpenes and other volatiles as much as you can. Okay, and we'll talk about, there's a common analogy between tomatoes and between cannabis that people have. Not just that, maybe they're roughly the same size plant, but you can look at what's happened to a beefsteak tomato or the tomato that you may see at McDonald's or something like this. It's a little bit, it's not to full color. It's kind of watery. The flavor is not there. On the other hand, we have heirloom tomatoes, right? These have been grown to taste good. The thing is that some of these mass market tomatoes are grown in accordance with a metric of yield, okay, per unit time. So we're trying to rush these plants to production. They're not fully ripe. And the genetics are plants that are high yielding plants. The heirloom tomato is going to taste better. It may not be as high yielding, but I think you can see where I'm going with this analogy here. We have a similar thing going on with cannabis, right? Folks are under a profit pressure to produce pounds of cannabis with a certain percentage of THC content to satisfy the recreational markets. So sometimes the flavor, the medicinal value, and the quality sometimes comes second. Okay, so we also have, as home growers, we have varieties that are high in specific cannabinoids that you can pick out and you can pick and choose from as simply as searching on the internet for different strains. We also have exotics, different land races that have developed in Africa, India, Asia. And we have also plants that are maybe one-to-one strains, things like this. Okay, you can also, if you do grow a single strain out, you can also network with other growers such as myself or other folks that you'll meet and find different strains so that you can maintain a variety while still growing a single strain yourself. So, trade with friends, that kind of thing. Okay, and Dr. Kaplan, can you jump in on why a home grower might want to maintain a medical card?
Sure. So a lot of reasons. I think, all for the reasons that you mentioned, the dispensaries have a very often a very narrow selection of products that they're producing, but they do produce them very well. And the growers who have been employed by these dispensaries work, it's in some cases at the top tiers of grow technology and experience in the world. So from one perspective, even though you might be growing at home, it's still certainly valid to try, the dispensary's products and kind of learn what the scope of opportunity is. But beyond that, having a medical card entitles you to more massive product. With a medical card, you're allowed to hold at home up to 10 ounces of manicured product every 2 months. That's a massive amount of product. And, depending on how good you are at growing, potentially you would exceed that, in which case you'd have to, really give the product away. if you don't have a medical card, those limits are far lower. So you're not only are you not allowed to grow as many plants in a house with a medical card. I think it's 12 plants per person. Pardon me. And then beyond having a medical card, if you don't have a medical card, you can't grow as many plants and you can't keep as much manicured product at home. It's actually not required to have a medical card in order to test the product that you're growing at home. And I'm sure, we'll cover this. But one of the things that is, incredibly generous, I guess, of the regulatory system in Massachusetts is the products here are incredibly thoroughly tested and really safe. But actually that testing is available for anybody who wants to grow at home. All 4 labs in Massachusetts will test products from anybody on the street, anybody growing at home. And in some cases it's at very, very little cost.
All right, awesome. Okay, so now that we've heard all the reasons why you might want to grow at home, I do want to, I have no reason to hide from you the reasons why you might not want to. Okay, so we've got upfront costs. It's not instant. Okay, you may need to source a supply before your first successful grow, right? Okay, it's not going to make you wealthy home growing. I'm sure there's the occasional exception to that, but let's not embark on that. Okay, if you can't stomach the possibility of a poor harvest, you should come up with other ways to secure your supply. But dispensaries are always available. And then growing can be difficult for folks with disabilities as well. You may have to lift an occasional bag of soil, which could weigh, I think at the most, maybe 15, 20 pounds. But you'll find online that lots of people have workarounds. I've seen people put their plants on Lazy Susan so they can trim and take care of them that way. So if you find that you do have any difficulties, talk with me. My information's in the bottom right corner there, and we'll figure something out for you. Okay, let's proceed here. And let's hear a few worst case scenarios, right? So your plant can die. Yes, it is possible. Persistent pests. There are certain pests that can live in your grow, and if you don't take all your plants out, they can continue living there. That is a worst case scenario, somewhat uncommon, but and then another risk would be that you've grown your plant out and then it doesn't produce as much as you like, or it doesn't produce something as potent as what you're used to. That's always a possibility, but we'll talk about in this first session how to mitigate that. All right, so here we'll compare indoor and outdoor growing. So all of these sessions are going to be about indoor growing, right? But we'll talk about the 2 options, because you definitely should consider outdoor growing if you do have the option available. So we'll start with indoor, right? So you can grow year round, of course. You do have greater upfront costs for the equipment. We'll talk about that today. And then we also have recurring costs to run lights and maintain the correct temperature and humidity, as well as giving nutrients to your plants. Now, you do get to control all the inputs for your plants. There's going to be a lot less of a pest risk because you're not exposed to the bugs and stuff outside. You can do hydro inside. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody do hydro outside, but perhaps it's possible. And then another con here that we should be mindful of is that it takes up living space, right? This last run, my greatest expense for my plants was rent. Okay, given their small square foot size, you do have to consider these things. So without the medical card, okay, if you don't have a medical card right now, you can grow up to 6 plants indoors, outdoors, wherever, as one person. And then if there are 2 of you that own the home or are on the lease, you can have 12 plants if you're over 21. So let's take this example of 12 plants, right? You're really going for it. If each plant takes up 4 square feet, you're eating up a good part of a room there. If you're using 50 square feet, folks do have rooms dedicated to their grows, but we'll touch on that in the next presentation. Okay, so outdoor. We've got Nuggy Nick here on Instagram. He's going to be trimming this plant probably for the rest of his life. So there's no limitation on canopy size for home growers that I'm aware of. Outdoor plants can grow at 12 foot, I'll say in diameter here, since this is kind of a bushy looking plant. They can grow 12 feet high and 12 feet wide. At the largest size, if you're enormously successful, I'd love to see your plant. But this guy here is going to be drowning in buds, so I hope he has folks to share those with. Okay, so outdoors, you've got larger space, better light, and more carbon dioxide, which the plant uses as a food source. That means you're going to have larger yields. There's a difference in flavor between outdoor and indoor plants that folks talk about a lot. There's also, sometimes that can be confused between hydro and outdoor. We can talk a little bit about that if you guys have any questions, but for the large part, I'd like to leave that up to everybody's subjective opinion in outdoor versus indoor. I have my biases, but that is what it is. So outdoor grows, they're going to be better closer to the equator, right? So we are both based in Massachusetts, so we are limited by our growing season here in a few different ways. They're not always obvious, but we'll go over that. But we'll assume that you have one growing season. There are workarounds, but you can grow outdoors in pots, or you can grow it in the ground or in a raised bed like we see here. And pests and disease outside are going to be something that you will just have to deal with. It's more of a preventative type of thing, but you're not going to eliminate all pests and disease outside. And then here in Massachusetts, we have a rule that plants cannot be seen from a public place. So you'll have to account for that. This guy's going to need a really tall fence, but I'm sure he'll figure it out. Okay. All right. So here we're talking about indoor, right? So we'll talk about your grow space. Okay. So that's going to be a larger closet. I grow in a tent. As you can see on the plants are in a reflective tent there. Or you can use a small room. Sometimes folks use a spare bedroom or something like that. But the important thing here, we'll talk about why, but it needs to be closed off from outside light. That's for more than just privacy reasons. And you also want to put your plants in a comfortable space. So if you keep your plants in a shed, you're going to be spending a lot to keep your plants comfortable. They want something between 65 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit and 50 to 70% relative humidity. So if you would be uncomfortable there, your plants will also be uncomfortable. So, you wouldn't live in your shed out back, so don't put your plants there unless you want to pay to keep the space warm enough. Okay. So you're going to have LED lighting. There are alternatives to that, but we're going to use LED lighting. That's all I can say. They are vastly cheaper to run. At this point, it's worth investing up front to run LED lighting. There are different varieties of incandescent bulbs that folks use, but they require ongoing cooling and all these things, and I wouldn't recommend it to somebody purchasing new lights. Okay, we're also going to need air conditioning. We want to buy efficient air conditioning. So you're going to need a little bit of dehumidification, but I list that first because it's the largest energy expenditure. You're going to need a little cooling during the summer and a little heating during the winter. But if you keep it in a living space, then you can sort of offset those costs into your normal day-to-day. So plants also require a lot of ventilation. Essentially what we're doing is we're keeping fresh air cycling past the plants. They take in carbon dioxide, so we want to make sure that they're always getting this carbon dioxide that they need to grow and produce buds. Okay, so how much does all this stuff cost? Again, we will talk about specific purchases later, but here you can see a couple photos of my tent here. So we've got LED lighting at the top with ballast, a little fan for the lights. This whole thing is in a 2 foot by 4 foot tent that's 6 feet tall. And then we've got our our fabric pots on the bottom, as well as nutrients to feed our plants. So the upfront costs that you're looking at are between $500 and $1,000. If you can go down to 500, it's a little bit of a challenge. You may be looking at more of a closet grow, which is definitely fine to do. And I would encourage anybody that has a viable closet to look into growing in a closet for your first grow potentially. And then you have continuing costs for each cycle. So depending on how long it takes for your cycle, it could be anywhere from $100 to $400 if you're spending tons on HVAC. That's going to be your primary cost is electricity for heating and cooling. So we want to eliminate that. But for myself, it's less than $150 per cycle, probably well below that, but that's my upper estimate. And then your yield. So you put in this money, you want, okay, we want some buds here. Okay. So I think a fair number to shoot for would be 250 grams per grow. But let's couch that in a few metrics and see what you might want to shoot for. So your plant count, we talked about, you can grow 6 plants. I would have grown 12. You can if you want, but let's start with maybe 3 or 4, right? Plant count does not actually bottleneck your yield. So the bottleneck to your yield is going to be canopy size, and that's going to be dictated by the amount of space that you can take up in your house or apartment or whatever. So let's take my 2 by 4 footprint tent, right? A tent can hold 1 plant. It can hold, I have 3 plants, 3 large plants in there right now. But each leaf on this plant that's filling up this space can only absorb so much light at a given time. And therefore you can grow your plant to fill the whole tent, or you can fill it with a lot of little plants. But either way, you're not going to see an enormous difference in your ultimate yield as far as the bottleneck goes. So let's talk about these benchmarks here. So we've got metrics as far as yields are going to be grams per square foot. So it's going to be the number of grams that you grow within square foot of your canopy space. So I think that's a really good metric to think about here. And it's going to be, because it's your bottleneck, if you grow many grams per square foot, I'll say you did a great job. If you grow few, then maybe not. Although, yield isn't always the bottom line, but grams per watt is another metric we have. So that's going to be grams per watt of lighting. So that's another unit that people talk about. And then folks also, as energy efficiency and running costs become a little bit more of a concern, we talk about grams per kilowatt hour. So 50 grams per square foot is going to be a good goal. And similarly, 1 gram per watt of electricity is also going to be a good goal. So, logically, if you have 50 watts per square foot of space, you've got that's how those numbers square out. So, okay, 50 grams per square watt, 50 grams per square foot, and then 50 watts per square foot. We get both 50 grams per square foot and 1 gram per watt as a good goal. So that's what we want to keep in mind. Okay, so that would be, if you get 50 grams per square foot, you get an A+ in my book. How much did I yield this last cycle, right? So I yielded 33 grams per square foot. Okay, so you can assign me whatever letter grade you like, but so I got 1.1 grams per watt of light because I dimmed my lights back a little bit. And then I got about 0.9 grams per kilowatt hour. If you're an experienced grower, you can kind of get the context there a little bit, but let's see here. And then we'll talk a little bit about how much work is this going to take me every day. Okay, so we can see a full tent down here, and we can try to think about, okay, we've got to grow these plants out. We've got to keep an eye on them. We have to watch for bugs. We have to water them as often as every day sometimes. Um, so to give the plants attention is your main source of time. So I'm just going to say, do not take any vacations during your first cycle. I know we have certain restrictions on vacations and none of us are taking them, but if you're watching this in the future, don't take any vacations on your first cycle, right? The reason for that is you don't want to leave your plants alone for several days at a time when you're at a critical point. Myself, I am planning a vacation during my cycle, but I'm planning it during a time when I know that we're not at a critical point. Okay, so you want to plan on giving your plants about an hour per day and maybe 2 hours per day on the weekend. That may be, that's on the conservative side. You probably won't need that amount of time, but I think on your first grow, you'll find yourself checking in on your plants quite a bit. So when you're setting up your grow, when you're dealing with hardware and soil, you're going to spend a lot of time tinkering with your grow, and it's going to look a little bit more like a workshop, right? You're going to have parts everywhere. Maybe you're unplugging and plugging in its extension cords and things like this. But after you have a little bit of experience under your belt and things are really dialed in, the plants are going to be asking for more of your attention than hard labor, right? So you want to be looking at the leaf health. You're going to be adjusting your lights a little bit, checking the humidity and the temperature for your grow. You may want to look for bugs. And then towards the end, about when this photo is, in very late flower, you're going to be checking out the trichomes on your buds. So you want to plan ahead when you're growing. We want to keep this in mind. So you want to know what you plan to do next week is essentially how it goes. So if you want to take a weekend trip to the hydro store, that's no problem. If you need to be going to the hydro store late on a Wednesday night, that may be a little bit of an issue, right? So you want to know what you need next. That's something you want to always be thinking about. And we'll try to keep you abreast of that with this series here. So if you know a grower, you've probably heard them complain about trimming, myself included. So, what I had to do to take this tent and turn it into a jar of buds is trim off all of these leaves, more or less. Break the plants down, trim down all the leaves. So you can imagine that takes several hours. So there is a portion of the cycle that takes a bit more labor, and that's right when you're done. There are machines for this, but we'll talk about that in the next presentation. Okay, so we're new growers today, right? So we need to learn a bit about cannabis basics. So on the left here, we have some photos of male plants. Cannabis is dioecious. It has either male pollen sacs or female flowers. The female flowers are what we want. Those are the buds that we saw in the previous photo. So male plants for us as new growers are a waste of space, okay? Male pollen causes female flowers to produce seeds. Seeded buds are expending resources, not on cannabinoids, but on producing the next generation of plants. So these buds end up less potent, and we don't really like to find seeds in our grinder or something like this. So male plants, they take up time, they take up resources, they don't produce buds. We don't want them, okay? So there are also hermaphroditic plants, and we'll talk about that in the next session. Cannabis has two basic life stages. We have a vegetative growth state, and then we have a reproductive flowering stage. So cannabis will not produce any buds until we've reached the flowering stage. Okay, so how do we reach the flowering stage? Cannabis, we'll say most of the cannabis and the cannabis that you all will most likely grow, um, uh, these are photoperiod plants. So what that word means, photo and period, just it's light and time, right? So what we're talking about here is that night length dictates the plant's hormonal shift into reproductive flowering. So the way that we get buds to be produced is we extend our nights to 12 hours. So for myself, I have a little timer on my lights, and I run them during vegetative growth. We run them for 18 hours during the plant's day, and then they're off for 6 hours, so they get to sleep, we'll say. Um, and that's what a typical day looks like. So 18 hours of light, 6 hours of night. Okay, when the plants are flowering, what we do is we cut back on the day length so that we take our plants through a 12-hour day and a 12-hour night. And this is what signals the plants to flower. So what you can think about is this is a seasonal change that we're simulating. So as autumn approaches and we've passed the 12-hour mark for day length, your plants are going to be signaled to flower. They know that they're coming towards the end of their life stage in autumn, and they're going to start thinking about producing buds and reproducing. And this is what we want to take advantage of. Okay, so clones and cuttings, just so that we're up to speed. A lot of times cultivators refer to clones as cuttings off a single mother plant. This is a way that cultivators are able to grow the exact same plant many times over genetically. So these plants are going to possess the same genetics, grow to a similar size, maybe produce the same amount of yield, that kind of thing. So that's just a little bit of background information. Okay, so we talked about the vegetative growth stage of the plant's life cycle, and we talked about the flower stage. So these photos are from Grow Doctor. So he's got a really dense canopy here on the left. And then on the right, the plants started producing buds, and they also stretched to be a lot taller. So what he's done is on the left, we have a long day length, and then on the right, we have a shorter day length so that they're getting less than 12 hours of light every day. All right. So we'll talk a little bit about my seed recommendations. So what I'd like for everybody to do is start thinking about what kind of genetics you want to grow in your tent, what kind of buds you hope to have, what kind of an experience we want here. So, let's jump on Instagram and social media and seed bank websites. Just start Googling, getting a sense of what kind of genetics do you like to have? Do you like for your medicine? But we'll cover a few points here, just very strictly. So I would first urge you to consider feminized seeds over regular seeds. So when we receive seeds in the mail or you bought at a store or whatever, statistically, on a regular seed, 50% of the population will be male and 50% will be female, right? But we've talked about male plants are a waste of space and time. So what we want to do is eliminate that risk. We have a technology in cannabis called Feminized Seeds. So I do this myself. I purchase feminized seeds rather than what they call regular seeds. So these are guaranteed to be female and they'll be marked feminized. They will advertise it as such. Okay, so my first grow was half males and I was like, I have no time for this, So I really don't want you guys to get frustrated as new growers or to take on that kind of risk of time and energy and yield to have male plants. So let's just not have any male plants and proceed with feminized seeds. Okay, so I'm also going to recommend what we call photoperiod plants. We want to avoid things that are labeled autoflower plants. We'll talk about that in the next presentation in depth. I have broken all of these rules on this slide, but we'll talk about why we don't want to, okay? All right, so I'm also going to recommend against bag seeds. So sometimes you purchase buds that have seeds in them. We don't like that, right? We do not want to grow out these seedy buds. We do not want to grow out the seeds that you found in your bag of buds, okay? We'll talk about why, but basically, if you found seeds in your buds, there is likely an issue with that plant's genetic stability. We have a phenomenon that basically amounts to we have heritable hermaphrodism in cannabis plants. We'll talk about why that is, but basically, bag seed is going to save you between $7 and $15 per seed. Your whole grow is going to cost you $100. So I would not recommend that small savings to risk your entire grow. Okay, your time is worth more than that. So let's not use bag seed. Okay, I'm also going to recommend against clones. This may be an unpopular opinion to an extent, but often clones have a small risk of carrying pathogens and bugs, viruses, and this can spread between your plants. And I don't want you folks having poor practices like that. As you get a little more experience, you can get a feel for when you feel comfortable accepting clones, and you have a good buddy who you trust, maybe who's been growing a very long time. But for now, we're not gonna grow out any clones. So we want to be purchasing feminized seed, not autoflowers, not regular seed. All right. So we have a very dark plant here in Kandahar, Afghanistan. So this is some Afghani land race that's used to produce whole storehouses full of hash. All right, well, that's just an example of an exotic genetic here. Okay, so we'll talk about selecting genetics, right? Genetics are going to be the #1 determinant of your success. Poor genetics can give you very small plants, unproductive plants that do not yield large buds for you, or they may be unhealthy. They may not uptake certain nutrients correctly. There can be all kinds of problems with bad genetics. But let's talk about what kind of genetics we do want. So we want to look for genetics that are known amongst the internet community to be easy to grow. So sometimes folks will talk about being disease resistant, having a fast cycle, and being good for beginners. So a popular pick is going to be Northern Lights. And I think a lot of folks, enjoy Northern Lights in the buds. And I think, you may like growing it as well. You may also know what you like, for an example, in the buds from a dispensary or somebody who's tested their buds. You may know what kind of cannabinoids you like. Maybe we have access to one-to-one seeds. You can grow seeds that are classified as hemp with virtually no THC if you choose. I may try that myself. I would love to hear about it if any of you do that. So a lot of growers or a lot of breeders distribute their seeds far and wide for sale, right? So people have grown out and tested these. So if you do sufficient research, you can start to hear about, okay, people are getting this percentage THC at least. You may hear also about testing of CBD, CBG, etc. I recently recommended mass medical strains in Massachusetts. So that's an example of, he doesn't necessarily list the percentage of every single cannabinoid in his seed catalog, but I got in touch on Instagram and he said, this plant is going to be high in THCA. This plant may have a bit more CBG. So, you can get a bit of a sense of what we want to try to grow for cannabinoids. Okay, so structure. We want to talk about the structure of the plant that you want to have. So this may be something new to folks who haven't seen a ton of cannabis plants personally. So what we want to start with, at least if you're browsing online, is we want to see photos of plants that people have grown out that are, the plant is large and it has large main buds here. So this plant here is quite tall. It's grown outdoor, but we do see a large main bud here, or a large cola. That's something we want to look for, is the ability of the plant just to produce large buds. If you're seeing catalog photos of smaller buds, you can start to say, if this is the best that this plant can do, maybe it's not a great idea. So that's where we'll start on that topic. And as I said, we want to really look for good online feedback. So I'll give you guys a few sources to look at and get started. Just browsing around and getting a feel for things. You don't have to have your seeds selected after this session. We want to get to that point after session number 2. But start getting a feel for what you think looks great, what you think would smell nice, what you think you want to be smoking. Okay. So these are the seedlings that I've selected. So I have broken all the rules, as I've said, right? So my previous cycle and this cycle are both autoflowers. And we'll talk about what that means a little more specifically in the future. But so these are from my current seedlings that you can see up close there. We've got 3 feminized auto-flowering seeds. These are Sour Stomper by Mephisto Genetics. So it's a cross. It's an F5 or F6, I believe. So it's a cross of a Grape Stomper OG and Sour Crack male. So I started sprouting them on one of them on November 30th, and then another one on December 9th. So we'll talk a little bit more about the timeline and you guys can follow along with my grow. And then I've also really close to the camera, you might be able to see there, I've got one feminized photoperiod plant, which is Panama Pupil version 2 by Mass Medical Strains. So that was also sprouted on the 30th. And we can see the fun descriptions that that we get for these strains, right? So this is supposed to, I'll read this here, the description of the Sour Stomper. It's supposed to be delicious sweet red grape infused with a raw, funky to meaty edge. Very powerful, grapey with piney, lemony undertones of flavors. They talk a bit about the effect. And you can ask folks who have tested this strain about what kind of cannabinoids they're seeing. Okay, and then in my inventory, we'll say in the jar right now from my last cycle, I have an F1 cross of Mephisto Genetics plant bred by Dave. You know who you are if you see this. So we had 5 plants in the tent. We used Nectar for the Gods nutrients, which is not armory, but generally natural input type of a nutrient. And I ran a side-by-side comparison of 3 plants grown in a coco coir medium versus 2 plants in soil. And we'll talk in depth about the different kind of grow mediums that you can be using. So in my opinion, it smells strongly of orange peel and pine aroma. You may know what terpenes those correlate with. All right. So we'll talk about, so what I did, let's say, I guess last week, or maybe a little over a week ago now. So last week for some of the plants, but anyway, so what I did was I popped the seeds. So the seeds came in the mail. They come in a little packet. They may be packed with some desiccant or something. Okay, so we've got our little seedlings. You can get hemp seed, I think it may be Whole Foods or something like that. But they're fairly small. This is a really nice zoomed in photo by, I believe, Sandy Seeds on Instagram. So this is what your seed is going to look like, and he has started to germinate this seed here. So here's my advice on starting seeds. There is no perfect solution to it, but what we want to do is give ourselves the best chance possible with our seeds. So you've invested maybe $50, $70, whatever it is in seeds. And that is a bit of money for one pop as far as your grow is concerned. So we want to make sure that they'll germinate. So here's what I do, and I found the most success with. So you want to scuff the seeds very gently with a little piece of sandpaper, and this will just allow a little bit more water to penetrate into the seed. And then we drop them in a shot glass of distilled water for about 8 hours. We don't want to have them in the water for longer than 8 hours because the seeds can potentially drown. We'll talk about why that is, but basically the roots we don't want to waterlog our seed. Okay, then it goes on to a wet paper towel. You can just take your shot glass of water and dump it directly onto a paper towel. And then we're going to have the seed right in the center of the paper towel. We'll fold the paper towel into quarters, so we'll fold it in half twice. And then we'll place the seed into a Ziploc bag. Then you want to hang your Ziploc bag, if possible, so that the seed can a little better orient its up and down. Otherwise, sometimes you get these corkscrew roots to start. So you can have multiple seeds in the same towel and Ziploc. You just want to have them about an inch apart. So how do we know when our seeds are done with their Ziploc incubator there? So when the taproots are about a 1/4 inch long, you can kind of see what that would look like in this picture here. You want to remove them very carefully. I use tweezers. So I take my plant and I just stick my finger in the soil about a 1/2 inch down. I dust in some mycorrhizae. We'll talk about what that is. But basically there's we'll talk about what that is. It's a very complicated topic, but so we'll dust in some mycorrhizae, dump our seed in, and we're gonna want to orient it so that the taproot is pointed down. And then we'll just lightly cover it with soil. I don't personally pack it down, but I just cover it over so that when the plant does come above the surface of the soil, it's sufficiently anchored. Okay. Then I take like a plastic cup, I place it over the seedling, and then we mist it once per day. So one item you want is a little mister. So when we mist the plant, we just do a light misting, enough so that the air may be at 100% humidity. And then we'll mist the inside of the cup, place the cup on top of the plant, and then we'll just leave it there. So you want to maintain a modest level of light. We don't need to blast these guys out of the water. You'll find that horticultural lights are extremely bright. If you are close enough, they can be approximately as bright as the sun if you stuck your face in one. So we want to maintain low light. You can use even just ambient lighting in your home is fine. I use my horticultural lights on the dimmest setting possible, and I face them away from the plants. And then we want to maintain 60% humidity. So your soil also, you're gonna want it to just be damp. You don't want it to be saturated because again, you can drown your seedlings, and we really don't want to do that. We want to lean always towards underwatering rather than overwatering. So if you stick your finger into the soil and it's feeling kind of dusty, it's time to add a little bit of distilled water. We definitely want to be using distilled water on seedlings. It's not a necessity, but I think it's a good idea. Okay, so we're familiarizing ourselves with growing. We have a bit of a timeline ahead of us. So this is a 6-month total timeline, and 5 months of it is going to be growing. I think this is what your grows will look like. Um, and we do have control over the plant to an extent. So this is a very general idea of what it may look like. These months are going to vary with grower decisions and plant genetics. Okay. So some plants have a longer flowering period, and the grower can dictate the length of the vegetative growth stage. We also give our plant a month to cure in a jar. So we chop it down, we dry it up, and then we place it in a jar for a month. So just factor that in. If you're impatient, you can start smoking your buds immediately, but you're going to get a much more of a quality and we'll say dispensary competitive product if you maintain your flowers in a jar for a month before we smoke them. Okay. All right, so our timeline is going to start with a seedling. It's going to be the first few weeks that we'll call it a seedling. And then we're going to enter our vegetative growth stage here. So we're going to grow out our plant and train it. That means, potentially anchoring down our plant with wires. And we're going to establish a base of leaves and strong branches and good roots. So what we're doing is we're building out the structure in terms of horizontal growth of the plant. And we want to sort of fill up the tent with nice leaves, and we're going to be taking up that whole canopy space with leaves during our vegetative growth stage. So that's going to take about 3 months. The plant is slow to grow at first and it gets faster and faster as it's able to take in more light and more nutrients and carbon dioxide. Okay, so during this stage, we're going to have our lights on a timer, and that timer is going to have the lights on for 16 to 20 hours per day. We don't really want it any shorter than that. And the number of hours that you have it on is up to personal preference. Right now, I believe I have my plants on a 20-hour light cycle. There are some trade-offs there. So it is up to personal preference though. So if you have your lights on a bit dimmer, you might want to have them on for a longer period of time. And if you have them on a bit brighter, then you may not need to have them on quite as long. We'll talk about that concept in the plant metabolism section. So we've grown our plant out for 3 months. We've filled our canopy space. Okay. Then what we do is we take our light timer and we cut it back to 12 hours per day. So this is going to give our plants the hormonal signal that it's time for them to reproduce, right? They think it's autumn. They think they don't have much time left. They've got to stretch and produce buds while they can, okay? Ensure the next generation. So at this point, we're going to identify any males. If you don't buy feminized seed, then you're going to want to have your males away from the tent. And your plant is going to double in height during that time. So what we're doing is we're having more rapid nutrient uptake. We're thirsty for more water. We're taking in more light. Our plant is going to double in size during these 2 months here. There's something that we call the flowering stretch. And we'll talk about that when we're planning our grow. We want to make sure that our plants grow tall, but they don't grow too tall for our tent or our closet or whatever it is. Okay, so at the end of these 2 months, this is a very approximate number that depends on your genetic selection, but we're going to make a decision here to chop down our plant. We're going to clip off the buds and we're going to hang them for about a week. That's our drying phase. And then, as I said, we're going to trim them down, get all those leaves off, and we're going to stick them in a jar for a month. So that's our 6-month cycle. Yours may be shorter or longer than that, depending. Maybe you don't want to grow your plants to fill the whole space. Maybe you don't want to grow them very tall. We can shorten this vegetative portion of growth here, and we can cut that back to maybe 2 months. So we can do an equal 2 month of veg and 2 month of flower before we chop the plant. So in that way, we could take us from 6 months down to 5 months. If that's your preference and that's something you're comfortable with doing. You'll find like myself, I don't always shoot for like the maximum yield possible. I kind of go for a more of what I'm comfortable with. These plants here are probably going to take a little bit over 100 days. I have selected extremely fast growing genetics. So it just goes to show you that, in order to be productive, you can make these decisions on a genetic basis, on a basis of selecting your seeds. Okay. So let's see, we're coming towards the end of the presentation here. I just want to say I'm looking for interested patients, people that are interested in growing. I want to work with you to grow out the best strains for you. I can help you guys find genetics that may be productive for you, give you a little bit of advice on that front, and we can find some buds that are to your liking. Okay, I'm especially looking to work with anybody that has what I'd call a life-altering diagnosis. Get in touch with me. I'd love to work with you to find the medicine that we may need, and to potentially establish a grow. I want to think about growing together. So connect with me online, send me questions, during this presentation. Outside of it, you can email me. I have my contact information on the bottom right here. So it's going to be honeybeargrows on Instagram, or just honeybeargrows at gmail.com. I have an extra dot there, but it's just at gmail.com. Okay. All right, so here I just, you guys may want to screenshot this or pause the video if you're on YouTube, but so we want to always think about ongoing education. So you have different kinds of sources. We have books, which we'll talk about on the next presentation, but we'll start with in person. You have me. We can talk directly on Instagram. I'm always very responsive. You can talk to me on email. We also have grow stores. So for myself, I was helped out a lot by Green Harvest Hydroponics. They're going to be, they have incentive to sell you things that cost money, okay? But they're similarly in the business of making sure that your grow is successful, because they want return customers, right? So no problem there. All right, so we have Instagram. Like it or not, Instagram is a really great source for cannabis content. Instagram doesn't like it. Do I love Instagram? Maybe not. Do you love Instagram? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But it is the place to be. I would recommend getting an Instagram that maybe doesn't even have your name on it, but it's a good way to cycle through folks' pictures and kind of read about what they're up to. So you can follow my Instagram, Honeyberry Grows. Seed Clinic has an Instagram where they'll update you on events. We've also got Build a Soil, who produces great content. I'll just highlight a few of these. Websites, you guys want to be, in addition to these videos, let's say you've come up to the next stage in your grow, you want to be looking, giving a quick search on Grow Weed Easy. Some of the information is a hair outdated and may not be on the cutting edge, but the point is it tells you how to grow weed easy. So, it's worth a look, making sure that you haven't missed anything there. I also love Cocoa for Cannabis, a lot of good fact-based information there. And then on YouTube, you may be seeing this on the Seed Clinic YouTube channel. Apogee Instruments is also great. We also have some fun ones. Future Cannabis Project, they just posted some good info from, I think, Ed Rosenthal today, I think. We've got Apogee Instruments, and then podcasts, in the grow, on your commute. I'm always listening to Shaping Fire, great podcast. And then Growcast is a little bit more rooted in being a product-centric kind of thing, but it gives you a lot of great information for new growers as well. So I would encourage you guys, if you're gonna be growing, is you wanna jump in with both feet. Always be taking in content whenever you can. always be hearing about what's the latest on the cutting edge. If you're not listening to what's on the latest on the cutting edge, you may as well be growing weed like they did in the 60s, right? So I would highly encourage it. We've got all kinds of things coming out. We've got triploid genetics. We've got, you could be growing plants that are purple. You can find out how to do this. You can find out about what great strains there are. We can find out about different techniques, light depth, all these different things. Okay. So I'll come back to that slide if you need to see it again. But so that's the wrap up of this first seminar. So the next one, we're going to talk about selecting seeds a bit more. And I'll finally tell you what autoflowers are, and we'll tell you where you actually buy seeds from. That's always a fun question. We'll talk about the difference between growing from seed and clone. We'll talk about water quality a bit, because that is, if you have well water, you're going to want to hear that. And then we'll talk about, where do the roots go? Okay, do they go in soil? Do they go into a hydroponic media? Do they go straight into the water? It's possible, and we'll find out about it. And then we're going to find out about growing out your plant in the vegetative growth stage. And then during that stage, we do plant training, and we top the plant. So we may do various things to encourage different kinds of growth from your cannabis. It's a very malleable plant, and we'll see how that works. I think anybody that joins the webinar will be sent a take-home pamphlet, but if you do choose to screenshot it, here's a link to a Google Doc, and then my information here. We'll leave that up for just a sec, and then I may switch back to the information on the websites and links and podcasts and such in a minute too. But that wraps up session one. So I think we'll take any questions if we have any.
I definitely do. I mean, that was an awesome presentation, Gil. Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to hear your perspective and to see you cover that so thoroughly. I mean, even just the introduction was interesting, and I got a bunch of pieces out of there that were even new for me. And I've already heard from some folks on the slide that you're a great teacher. This has really been really enjoyable.
Great, so thank you.
Thank you, first of all. And we have a bunch of people who are here with us live. If anybody has questions, please throw them up on the Q&A.
Yeah, cool. What we can do while we're hanging out here in the webinar is I'll run up to the tent, and we can take a closer look at some of the plants.
Awesome.
And I'll take myself off mute there, so we can have a little back and forth up there.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
We'll do a live break.
Yeah. All right.
Awesome.
So here I am up in the tent here. Ooh, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
All right, great. So I'm up here in the tent. We have our 3 sour Stomper autoflowers here in the pots. We'll take a closer look in a second. But here we have our Mephisto genetics, or excuse me, Mass Medical Strains photoperiod plant here. And so that we can get a little bit more of an up close look here, we've got, let's see if we can see that. We've got some roots that are approaching the edge of the plant here. Let's adjust the lighting a little bit. But so what we're doing is we are starting this guy in a cup, and then that's going to get transplanted later. So let's see if we can get a better look. So we've got our roots that are hitting the side here. And what we're going to do is we're going to grow this plant out enough that it fills this cup in the sense of the roots just hitting the edge how they are. And this guy is just about ready to transplant. And this is what you guys are going to see after, let's see, this was from 11:30, so about 2 weeks worth of growth. We can see that this guy really stretched towards the light, and it's kind of bonsai'd itself a little bit and stretched out, but it's a fair sized plant. And then we can get a little closer here to these Mephisto plants. These are grown in coco coir, and they're maybe, what, 6 inches tall? So this guy is from December 9th, so it's a bit younger. And here we have, this is, I just like to use these little cups to maintain the humidity. So what I do is I grab a few of these, and then I start with just an intact cup, and then I take a lighter and we just melt little holes in here. You can ask the hydro store, this is the best solution to this, believe it or not, of maintaining humidity on here. So we have a little bit of moisture in the soil, moisture in the air, and we can mist the inside of this cup, place it on here, and we maintain humidity. The plant has a little bit of a need for a higher humidity because it has trouble uptaking as much water as a full-grown plant would. It's new to the soil, it's just trying to get situated. So if we can help it out by giving it a little bit of misting to the leaves, that's a good practice. Put that back on this guy here. There's 2, there's number 3 over here. So I actually have another side-by-side going on. So these 2 plants are going to be grown with nectar for the gods nutrients in the cocoa. And then this guy on the right here, we're using worm castings, biochar, we're using down-to-earth dry amendments. So that's already been mixed into the cocoa coir media. So it actually won't need any additional nutrition until it comes to flower. When I'll supplement the phosphorus and potassium with a bit of top dressing here, and we'll water that in. So we can see here in our tent, we want to maintain a good humidity, a good temperature here. I've got a humidifier in the back just as backup. I've got our familiar cartoon character here. And then here's my lighting setup. So we have, these are quantum boards from HLG. That just means that I buy this LED board, and then it comes with a heat sink here. And we can see that these guys keep themselves cool just through the heat sink. I put a fan on them just so they run a little bit more efficiently. And then I have wired them up to LED drivers here. And that's what gives us the current and voltage that these guys are expecting. And then we have a third light here that's not. But yeah, so we also have an AC Infinity fan unit outside the tent here. And then we also have a carbon filter. So what will happen is your plants will start to smell extremely dank. So what we'll do is we'll close up the tent. We'll suck the air out and give the tent some negative pressure, and then we'll exhaust it out of this carbon filter here. So that's what keeps things, maybe landlord friendly. So the AC Infinity unit has a probe in the tent, and it just maintains the temperature and percent humidity that we like. And just a little probe here. So we kind of hang it at about plant height, and then it keeps things how we like them. So above the tent, I also have, timer. I have a power strip. I like to keep things really safe. So there's the power strip's limited to like 15 amps. Yeah, so this tent is 2 feet deep by 4 feet wide, and then 6 feet tall. So this is a fairly minimal setup. you know, between this and a closet, they may be of similar size. So I would say this is a good starting size. The ideal would be a 4 by 4 foot tent to get a bit more productivity going. Um, yeah, that's the simple setup we have going on here. We have the tent has what's that?
I was just going to ask, is one of the things that you can supply a sort of shopping list of all of the items that you've purchased so that someone who wanted to copy what you're doing could do so?
Yeah, definitely. So that's the plan for I'm trying to remember if it's session 2 or 3. I think it's session 3.
Yeah.
We're gonna give you my recommended shopping list. It's going to be items that are going to help guarantee a good result. I'm not necessarily going to give you the cheapest items, but it will get you off on the right foot. So if you're ready to do this, that will be the thing to look at. So it'll give you your budget, your specific items, and it will be a bit of a package. There's a lot of specking out of parts that this will help with. For example, providing the amount of light for your area, or the amount of airflow for your area. You know, you have to do a little bit of math to figure that out, so it'll help in that regard. Let's see. So this is what your tent is going to look like. So, you know, you can put this really anywhere, spare bedroom, wherever you like it. You can potentially jam it into a closet, but I don't know if that's a super great idea from an airflow standpoint. We have reflective walls here, which are going to increase the efficiency of your light by maybe like 3 or 4%. So that's another perk of having a tent, as opposed to like a painted white closet. And the enclosed environment is really what we want. The tent's open right now, but it has like a zipper door. So the enclosed environment is what we're after, and that helps us keep the light in as well as keeping light out, maintaining the nice temperature and humidity. And plants really love a predictable environment, right? They move very slowly, right? So if you are changing up the light on them all the time, or changing up the humidity because you are opening and closing the door because you want to see what they're up to, that doesn't necessarily help them, and they don't really love it. So that's what the tent achieves, is it lets us have a very stable environment for these guys.
Awesome. All right, Gil, this was a really fantastic introduction. I can't wait till the next one, honestly. And I'm sure everybody else feels the same. And we're going to have a whole host of comments, I'm sure, through the YouTube publishing.
Cool.
All right. Well, that's a wrap for tonight. Thanks everybody for joining. And for folks who can, you know, please leave a comment on the YouTube video and share, and, you know, keep us in touch.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.